Welcome back, historians. Landforms and waterways. East Asia is made up of 6 countries: China, Japan, Mongolia, North Korea, South Korea, and the de facto country of Taiwan. A de facto country is one that is not legally recognized. The region's largest country, China, is the world's 4th largest country in land area. Mainland East Asia, which includes China and Mongolia, can be divided into 3 subregions like steppes. The highest steppe is the Plateau of Tibet. Much of it is more than 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers, above sea level. High mountains circle the Plateau of Tibet. The Kunlun Shan Range is on the north. On the south are the Himalaya, the tallest mountains in the world. The middle steppe is north and east of Tibet and has lower mountains and plateaus. Much of the land to the north is desert or near desert. Land along the southern part is forested. There are deep canyons where the land descends from Tibet. Low hills and plains form the 3rd and lowest steppe, which covers most of the eastern third of China. Most Chinese people live on these plains. In addition to the mainland, East Asia includes a large peninsula between the Yellow Sea and the Sea of Japan, East Sea. It is home to 2 countries, North Korea and South Korea. The peninsula is mountainous in the northeast. In the south and west, broad plains stretch between the mountains and the coast. Japan is an archipelago, or chain of islands, along the eastern edge of the Sea of Japan. It is roughly 1,500 miles, 2,414 kilometers, long, and consists of 4 large islands and thousands of smaller ones. The islands of Japan are part of the Ring of Fire, which nearly encircles the Pacific Ocean. The islands were formed by volcanic eruptions millions of years ago. Mount Fuji, a beautiful, cone-shaped volcano, is a well-known symbol of Japan. Japan is one of the most earthquake-prone countries in the world. When an earthquake occurs below or close to the ocean, it can cause a tsunami. This is a huge wave that gets higher as it approaches the coast. Tsunamis can wipe out coastal cities and towns. Hundreds of miles southwest of Japan's main islands lies another large island, Taiwan. Like Japan, it was formed by volcanic activity. Mountains stretch the length of the island. On the western side of the island there is a gentler slope than on the steep eastern side. Broad plains spread across the western part of the island. 4 seas sit along the eastern edge of East Asia. The South China Sea lies between southeastern China and Taiwan. The East China Sea lies between China and Japan. In the north, it meets the Yellow Sea, which is shaped by the Korean Peninsula and the northeastern coast of China. Farther north, Japan, the Korean Peninsula, and the Asian mainland nearly surround the Sea of Japan, East Sea. East Asia's 2 most important rivers are the Huanghe, Yellow River, and the Changjiang, Yangtze River. The Huanghe gets its name from yellow-brown silt called loess. Silt deposited by floods has created a broad, fertile plain that has some of China's best farmland. These floods have also caused much damage and loss of life. The Changjiang is the longest river in Asia and China's principal waterway. It also provides water for rice farming. Japan's major rivers are short, steep, and swift. Most of them generate hydroelectric power. The main rivers of the Korean Peninsula flow from inland mountains toward the Yellow Sea. North Korea's longest river, the Yalu, forms the country's border with China. Climate. Climates in East Asia vary greatly because of several factors. Latitude. The region spans a great distance from north to south. Elevation. 2 areas at the same latitude can have very different climates if one is higher than the other. Air masses. Cold, dry, polar air spreads from northern Asia in colder months. Warm, moist, tropical air spreads northward and eastward from the Pacific Ocean in warmer months. Southeastern China is hot and rainy much of the year, with lush vegetation. To the north, there is more seasonal variation. Taiwan, Japan, and the Korean Peninsula are generally wetter and have milder temperatures than mainland areas at the same latitudes. The climate in Mongolia and north-central and northwestern China is dry. Winters are bitterly cold. This region includes the Gobi Desert and the Taklamakan Desert, as well as treeless grasslands. The plateau of Tibet in southwestern China also has a dry climate. The Himalaya block moist air flowing northward from the Indian Ocean. Because of the elevation, the plateau is cold and windy throughout the year. Natural resources. China holds the greatest share of the region's resources. Japan is one of the world's leading industrial countries, but has few mineral resources. It must import many raw materials. Taiwan, another major industrial country, also has limited resources and must import minerals to meet demand. The largest deposits of fossil fuels are in China. China is the world's largest producer of coal. It also has large oil and natural gas reserves under the South China Sea and in the Taklamakan Desert in the far west. Despite these resources, China still cannot meet all of the energy needs of its growing economy. Both China and Japan use hydroelectric dams to produce electricity. Eastern China was once covered by forests, but people cut trees down for heating, building, and to create farmland. Today, forests cover less than 1/6 of the country. More than half of Taiwan is covered in forests. However, much of the forested land is protected, so Taiwan must import wood. Almost 2/3 of Japan is forested. Logging is limited because the Japanese consider many forest areas to be sacred. In the Korean peninsula, many trees have been cleared for farmland. About 3/4 of North Korea is forested. Early East Asia. Chinese civilization is over 4,000 years old. For many centuries until the early 1900s, emperors or empresses ruled China. A dynasty, or line of rulers, held power until it was overthrown. Then a new leader would start a new dynasty. Under the dynasties, China developed an advanced culture and conquered neighboring lands. The Chinese tried to keep out foreign invaders. Most of its borders were natural barriers such as seas, mountains, and deserts. To the north, the Chinese built the Great Wall for protection, beginning about 2,200 years ago. Over the centuries, it grew to stretch thousands of miles from the Yellow Sea in the east to the deserts in the west. It remains in place today. A great thinker named Confucius believed in the importance of the family. He thought a ruler should lead as though he were the head of a family. He founded the belief system called Confucianism. Another thinker, Lao Tzu, founded a belief system called Taoism. It taught that people should live in harmony with nature. A third belief system, Buddhism, came to China from India. Under the Han Dynasty, 202 BC AD. 220, the arts and sciences flourished. The process of making paper was invented, and officials began keeping paper records. Han rulers encouraged trade along the Silk Road. This was a caravan route that stretched between China and Southwest Asia, into Europe and South Asia. The Chinese sent silk, tea, spices, paper, and fine porcelain west as far as the Mediterranean in exchange for wool, gold, and silver. New inventions changed life for the Chinese people and became important around the world. Korea was settled by people from northern Asia. In the 1200s, Mongols invaded China and Korea. They were driven out at the end of the 1300s and a new Korean dynasty came to power. It stayed in power until modern times. In the AD 300s, Buddhism spread to Korea from China. Later, Confucianism became the major religion. Korean writing used Chinese characters, and Korean artists and writers were inspired by Chinese art and literature. Korean rulers adopted Confucianism as a basis of government. In some periods China provided military protection, but in others Koreans feared Chinese invasion. The Japanese islands were settled by people from Korea and China. Close ties with China led to a flow of ideas and culture that transformed Japan. The Japanese used the Chinese calendar and the Chinese system of writing. They adopted Chinese technology. Buddhism spread to Japan from Korea. There it mixed with the Japanese religion called Shinto. Japan was ruled by emperors. Over time, they began to lose power, and landowning families set up a feudal system. Under this system, nobles gave land to lesser nobles in exchange for their loyalty and military service. At the bottom of the social ladder were the peasants who farmed nobles' estates in exchange for protection. By the 1100s, a military leader called the shogun held the real power in Japan. He was supported by landowning warriors called samurai. Change in East Asia. Until the 1500s, East Asia was isolated from the rest of the world. By the 1890s, European governments and Japan had claimed large areas of China as spheres of influence. These are areas of a country where one foreign power has exclusive trading rights. Anger against foreign invaders helped lead to a revolution in 1911. By 1927, a new government was formed by the Nationalist Party, led by Chiang Kai-shek. The new government was challenged by Mao Zedong, who believed in communism, a system in which the government controls all means of production. After years of civil war, the Communists won power in 1949. Around 1542, a Portuguese ship heading for China was blown off its course and landed in Japan. It was followed by more traders and Christian missionaries. By the early 1600s, Japan's rulers decided to isolate Japan. In 1854, the United States pressured the Japanese to open their country to foreign trade. Japan set out to transform itself into a modern industrial and military power and began to create an empire. By 1940, Japan controlled Taiwan, Korea, parts of mainland Asia, and some Pacific islands. This expansion was one reason that Japan fought the United States and its allies in World War II. Modern East Asia. After 1949, China became two Chinas. On the mainland, the communist government took over businesses and industry. It also took land and created state-owned farms. In the late 1950s, China introduced the Great Leap Forward to increase industrial output. Cities grew fast as peasants left the land to work in factories. A drop in food production and natural disasters led to widespread famine. During China's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, intellectuals and students were sent to the countryside to work in manual jobs. Mao hoped to get rid of cultural elements that did not support his idea of communism. After Mao's death in 1976, economic reforms have helped China become a rising global power. Taiwan's government limited the freedom of the people. By 1970, however, its leaders had introduced democratic reforms and developed an economy based on capitalism. The island became an economic powerhouse. Following World War II, Korea was divided. South Korea was supported by the United States. Communist North Korea had ties to China and the Soviet Union. War between the two broke out in 1950 when North Korea invaded South Korea. The war ended in 1953. South Korea has followed capitalism and built a strong economy. North Korea's economy is controlled by the government. Its people face many hardships because most resources go to the military. After being defeated in World War II, Japan lost its overseas territories and military might. The government worked closely with businesses to plan the country's economic growth. The Japanese became leading producers of ships, cars, cameras, and computers. By the 1990s, Japan was a global economic power. The people. Most people in East Asia live crowded together in river valleys, basins, deltas, or on coastal plains. The lands and climates there are favorable to agriculture and industry. These are some of the most densely populated areas on Earth. China has had a large population for much of its history. By the middle of the 1900s, explosive population growth was causing many problems. In 1979, government policies encouraging families to have no more than one child helped slow China's growth. The 2010 census showed a population of 1.37 billion people. The East is much more densely populated than the West and Northwest. Population growth in other parts of East Asia also slowed at the end of the 1900s. Japan's low birth rate means that the average age of the population has increased. Nearly 1/4 of the population is 65 or older. Since the mid-1990s, Japan has encouraged more births. Soon the country could face a shortage of workers and have to allow more foreign workers into the country. Throughout China's history, most of its people lived off the land as farmers. Economic reforms in the late 1970s, however, caused a surge of urbanization. Millions of peasants left their farms and moved to cities. Today, nearly half of the country's people live in cities. Shanghai is China's largest city. There are dozens of Chinese cities with population greater than 1 million. Urbanization began earlier in other East Asian countries. In Japan, 2/3 of the people live in cities. The cities of Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and Yokohama form a megalopolis, or supersized urban area, along the coast. Greater Tokyo, Japan's largest city, is home to 32 million people. As South Korea industrialized, more people moved to cities. Now, 83% of South Koreans live in urban areas. The capital, Seoul, has more than 10 million people. Across East Asia, the standard of living in cities is generally higher than that in rural areas. Culture in East Asia. In each East Asian country, most people are ethnically similar and speak the national language. The official language in China is Mandarin, but many dialects are spoken. People practice many religions and belief systems. Buddhism is practiced throughout the region, often alongside other religions. The governments of China and North Korea limit religious practice, believing that religion has no place in a communist country. In recent decades, this policy has been relaxed somewhat in China. A number of art forms have long been popular in East Asia. Artists in China, Korea, and Japan paint the rugged landscapes of their countries. Their works reflect a special reverence for nature. Ceramics and pottery have been important parts of East Asian art since prehistoric times. Weaving, carving, and lacquerwork are also important. In China and Japan, calligraphy, the art of turning the written word into beautiful images, is considered one of the highest art forms. East Asians have strong literary and theatrical traditions. Both Japan and China are famous for the traditional forms of theater. East Asians have also developed new forms of expression. Today, Japan is known for anime, a type of animation. Comic books and cartoons using this style are popular all over the world. South Korean, K-pop, music is popular with the young in Japan and other countries. It has its roots in dance and electronic music from the West. People in East Asia enjoy many pastimes. Millions practice traditional martial arts such as Tai Chi and Taekwondo. American baseball is popular in Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea. American basketball is a top sport in China. The family has traditionally been the center of social life in East Asia. In rural areas, different generations of one family may share a home. As more people have moved into urban areas, some traditional attitudes have begun to change. East Asian cultures place a high value on education. Teachers are respected, and children are expected to work hard. Rice and noodles are staples in the diets of most East Asians, but cuisine varies widely in the region. There are many varieties of Chinese cooking. Japanese foods often include seafood and tofu. Mongolian meals often feature meat and dairy products. Holidays are important in East Asia. Families gather to remember ancestors and celebrate on New Year's in Japan and China, where it is called Spring Festival. In Korea, the Harvest Moon Festival is similar to Thanksgiving in the United States. Current issues in East Asia. Recent rapid economic growth has transformed East Asia. Today, only the United States has a larger economy than China and Japan. With growth have come problems. In China, factories, coal-burning power plants, and the growing number of cars and trucks have led to dramatic increases in air pollution. Rapid urban growth has eaten up valuable farmland, and many cities face water shortages. Japan has similar issues. Polluted air has caused acid rain and other problems, but Japan has tried to protect the environment. Earthquakes are a constant threat. In 2011, an earthquake in Japan killed thousands of people and damaged several nuclear power plants. It disrupted trade and manufacturing around the world. Many of the goods manufactured in East Asia are shipped to the United States and Europe. Trade between China and the United States is not balanced. In 2010, the U.S. trade deficit with China rose to $273 billion. Japan and China are both dealing with the challenges of population growth. China has fewer young adult workers as a result of its one-child policies, and the percentage of elderly people has grown rapidly. Political differences are another challenge. Japan is in dispute with Russia over ownership of the Kuril Islands north of Japan. North Korea's efforts to build nuclear weapons have drawn harsh criticism from several countries. Both China and North Korea face questions about human rights. China continues to be pressured for its views on Tibet and Taiwan. China also faces a growing income gap between people in urban and rural areas.